we've all been to those events where it's, wow, okay, this is the same 30 people as it
Yep.
has been for the
Yep.
last 5 years. Let's switch it up a little bit. That was a sort of a value statement that I made at the very beginning when I was setting this up, was that you will pretty much never be accepted to every single market, and you will pretty much never be guaranteed to get into everything you apply for, even if you're sort of what I consider a regular, because every single market, I want 30% at least to be different than the market before. In March, out of those 120 vendors, between March and May, the May event had, I think, 6 of the same vendors that March did.
Welcome to the Coast Podcast. I'm Emily, a virtual assistant agency owner who left Amazon in 2019 to build my dream.
And I'm Whitney, a freelance writer and communications consultant who never felt at home in a cube farm.
We wanted to learn from people who paved their own ways like we did. So we created this podcast to talk to others who are brave enough to pick a different path. Creatives, entrepreneurs, people doing their careers and their lives their way.
Join us as we make new friends, get inspired, and show you beautiful paths less traveled.
Not every road leads to the coast, but the ones that do come with a great view.
Hi, everyone. My name's Emily Given, and welcome back to the Coast. My name's Emily Given. I already said that. And I own a virtual assistant agency called She's a Given, and I'm based here in Linwood, Washington.
And my name's Whitney Popa. I'm Whitney Popa. I didn't want you to feel alone in that.
Never alone.
And I own a boutique copywriting agency in Edmonds, Washington, as well as a publishing house, also based in Edmonds. And that's all I'm going to say about that because I'm very excited to talk to Sarah. This has been on our calendar for months, and we finally have her in front of us. And we are going to hype her this whole time, even though Sarah, the owner of Making Local Markets, calls herself your small business hype girl. She owns Making Local Markets, like I said, and they provide events and resources for small businesses in the Seattle area, which pretty much everybody we have on this podcast is somebody we know whose events we've been to and literally stalked and pestered to come on here and tell you about their stuff. And Sarah is one of those people, which is why I'm so excited. Yeah. So welcome, Sarah. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all the work that you do in our community.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to have gotten to know and getting to know both of you. And yeah, I am Sarah. I own Making Local. I run the Making Local Markets, and I can't wait to chat about all things small business.
Yeah. And I'm somewhat biased because, or not, well, obviously biased, but also what I'm trying to say is I have a little bit more information than the average bear about Sarah. And what I would like to dig into now is let's start by going backwards, because you just quit your full-time job to go all in on Making Local, which we have to give you major props for because it was a big deal.
Thanks. It was terrifying.
Yeah, it is terrifying.
It is.
So yes, we have to underline, underscore, italicize that.
Yeah.
And then I want you, with that in mind, tell us how you got there.
Yeah. Great place to start. So I've always been a maker, a doer, keeping busy, working multiple jobs, or having 17,000 hobbies. I've always been that girl since I was little. And then I hit college and I was like, okay, great, cool. I'm going to do art as a business, as a job. I knew what I wanted to do going into school. I was like, I'm going to be a graphic designer because I can still do art and then also have financial stability and a career and whatever. Insert recession here.
Yeah. What
So
I'm hearing is elder millennial.
Yes. Yep. I graduated in 2009,
Yep.
middle of the recession. And I was like, cool. No one's hiring designers. So now what? My once and, future preparedness did not hold up. And that's life, right? That's 1,000% life. We never know what's coming. We never know what tomorrow holds. And we've got to be prepared to pivot. So I had been interning doing some wedding invitations and some design work. I ended up staying on with that person and did some invitations for a while. I did my own invitations on the side for a while, and then I was working retail. And retail, I said that with a downturn in my voice, and I didn't really mean to, because I think retail is the perfect place to start if you need any sort of sales, customer service, or just like general peopling skills. You're going to get all of that really, really fast if you work retail or any sort of customer service job, food service, whatever that looks like. So I was working at Barnes & Noble. I ended up
I love
doing,
Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, I was
I
gonna say
love it.
that was my
I
dream job.
love Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
Yep. Spent most of my paycheck on books. Yep.
Yeah.
Did that. But you know what? It got me through school, and it got me through after school, and it was a really wonderful place to build friends and community and all those things. So I think I learned that somewhere deep in my body before I even recognized what that was or what that felt like. And then I had 10 jobs in 10 years, and some of them were literally 60 days at a job, and we were both like, yeah, no, this is not a good fit. And some of them were 2 or 3 years, and I learned a lot. My tool belt grew a lot. And then this is taking way longer than I meant to explain all of this, but then I ended up at the city of Bothell, and I loved it there, and I was there for 5 years. And when I'd been doing side jobs, side hobby hustles this whole time, my most recent one was making macrame, and I was selling at local craft shows, local markets, local maker market type events, and I loved it. What I learned during the pandemic is that I did not love making for quantity, and I didn't love making on a schedule. I liked making for me. And so I let that go. But I was like, okay, these are some of my favorite people on the planet, these small business handmade maker people. How do I keep hanging out with them? I was like, how do I not be a maker but also hang out with all the makers? And so the world was opening up from the pandemic, and in September of 2021, I pulled together the first Making Local Market, which was called the Bothell Maker Market at the time, and it was freaking awesome. To the point that I could never have anticipated that. And it was the right time, the right place, the right community, the right sort of set of tools that I had already had to make that magic happen. And then we took it from there, and I stayed at my job for another almost 3 years and kept doing those on the side. My job knew about it. They were great about it. I was very careful about that work side job boundary, but they were part of the process because I was working with the people at the city of Bothell. So
Yeah, I was gonna say you had kind of an in. Me and Edmonds, I mean, I just know everybody.
completely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I knew the right people to ask the right questions and go from there. But yeah, that is how we got to the markets.
And like you
And
said too, Bothell is so poised for that and
1,000%.
needs that.
Yes. And we just needed something like, if you look at where the markets are in the Pacific Northwest, they're almost all in Seattle, like Seattle,
Yeah.
or they're north in Bellingham or Mount Vernon, or on the Wenatchee side. They're on the east of the mountains, but there's really nothing between like Bellevue and Shoreline and north to Mount Vernon. So I was like, okay, there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of people who like handmade goods here. Like, why not? Let's try it. And Bothell showed up and continues to show up every single time. And I could not have been prepared for how excited they would be for that.
So
Yeah.
cool.
I'm obsessed. And I went to the last one, my kids and I in the rain, they went to the unicorn drink machine situation, and I fangirled over London. Like I said before we started recording, London owns Particle Goods, which is huge nationally, I think, and especially in this area, but very beautiful black and white packaging, the most delicious candle scents, incense cones, all the things. And what's so cool is knowing you and knowing that I can trust you. I'm hitting up every single tent and being like, all right, I know that this is like high quality, high vetted. And you recently made a reel on your Instagram about your process for
Mhm.
applications and everything. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. And that was sort of in response to the fact that I waitlist a lot of people, which feels icky and can kind of suck for those folks who are getting waitlisted, but it's really a quantity problem. So when I'm filtering through applications, I'm really looking at the work first. Yes, I want to get to know you as a business. Yes, I want to make sure we're diverse and inclusive and all of those things. But ultimately, I want the products to shine. And if your products don't shine, then I'm honestly not really going to take a second look. I'm going to be like, you need to like show me how cool your stuff is. Show me how unique your product is. And yes, get in here. But I look at the work first and then I look at the people. And that may sound callous, but it's really efficient because I can fall in love with a person and be stoked about a person and then find their work and be like, ooh, actually. And that's super awkward. So I look at the work first, and that's if your work is better than somebody else's work, chances are you're going to get in, or vice versa. If your work is not up to like the standard of this market, like you probably won't. And there are markets for everybody and there are events for everybody. And whether or not I personally think your product is up to standard, that's a personal preference. These are the markets I run. I don't You can love your product and your product can be incredible and it could just not be a good fit, and that's a reality too. So, I look at the work first.
I also feel like that's a gift to them because then you probably give feedback on what they can improve.
A little bit.
And yeah, I mean, if they followed up, right, like you would
Mhm.
be honest about, because the reason I'm going, like from the customer point of view, I have my kids with me. I need to, like, I don't always have the whole day to spend. I noticed when I was at the last one, there's tons of families there, and I
Mhm.
don't have time to waste by being confused or looking at things that are low quality or whatever, and going into something where I know it's highly curated, that you are there and walking around and like managing people and tents, and that I know like I'm going to this. Sarah has put her stamp on this, and I know that it's a great quality candle or an awesome, I call them ditty bags for like toiletries and things
That's
like that.
awesome.
I know that these people are here for me and that Sarah did the upfront work so that it's not just some random mishmash like all love. I just redid the website for them, but Taste Edmonds used to be where it's here's a bunch of like macrame things next to a T-Mobile booth, next to so and so for Republican Congressperson tent and all of that. It's just whoever paid. It's not
Yeah.
like that anymore. But when
Mm-mm.
before we lived here and we came to get a taste of Edmonds, I was like, I do not like this taste.
Yep. No, totally. And what's funny is that I actually sold macrame at one of those events and felt the same way as a vendor. Like you want to know that your products are going to be in a space with not like products, but like level of products. You don't want to be at a market and be the only person selling a $60 bag or a $60 mug and then have the person next to you be selling a sort of cheaply mass produced $5 mug. That's not going to, nobody's going to succeed at that point. So this really is sort of a community based local market, and we're featuring all of those handmade small local goods. We don't have resale products. For all that I love working with nonprofits and sponsors, they will not have booths there. That's just a thing that is something that I decided because I didn't like attending or vending at those events with that sort of like mishmash of here's an MLM next to a sponsor booth that's selling insurance. And it's just like
Right.
that
Yeah.
doesn't fit, you know? Let's
Yeah.
really show off these local businesses that are doing the work. I mean, they're all
Yeah.
working so hard.
They really are.
Yeah, they're crushing it.
How do you source locations? You're often at Bothell, but you've been all around.
Yeah, that that is one of my least favorite parts of the process. Just because with downtown Bothell, it was so ready and available that I got kind of spoiled with how easy that was and how many vendors I can fit in that space. So I usually feature anywhere from about 80 on the small end to about 120 vendors at a time. So for me, going into an indoor location where I can only fit 30 doesn't really make sense for me. So I do quite a bit of digging to find good venues. I've worked with a handful in Seattle that have been awesome. I worked with one in Snohomish that was awesome. And then We were in Mount Lake Terrace last year, and I'm trying to get back to Mount Lake Terrace because they're eager and ready too. But finding a space that's like large enough, has enough parking, all those things, there's a lot of logistics that most folks don't think about. They're like, oh, well, why can't you just pop up right here? And it's like, well, so and so owns that property and they don't want me to. Or where would you park? Where would you park 100 vendor vehicles? What are we doing with that?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of logistics and it can be tricky. I usually end up closing a road, which is kind of fun. It sort of makes it more truly of an event, but that has its own logistics for like fire service and police service and medical aid. You've got to have all of that stuff sort of in place. And those are the things that sort of aren't as visible unless you're looking for them.
I'm pretty sure that your Mount Lake Terrace one was the first one I went to, and I loved that it was across from Double D's. For anybody who's
Yes.
familiar with the area, I was like, all right, I was hungry, so I went across the street and got a pepperoni stick on my way out, some meat
Yes.
for dinner. But it was, and I mean this very positively, kind of a random
It,
place.
super
And
random.
I thought that was awesome because it was this great use of a space that isn't often used with a ton of
Mhm.
traffic coming through it because that area is so connected to all sorts of interstate and light rail type stuff. So
Yeah.
I was like, yes, she's coming close to me. And it was just so, so great. I'm curious too, you had mentioned when we chatted before, and I recently was driving through town, creepily saw you in Edmonds walking around. I was like, ooh, Sarah's here, like having conversations with people. And I was very excited about that. But I was wondering, is she doing her coaching? So something that you had mentioned too that you wanted to expand your business into doing was helping makers and coaching other people to do pop-up markets potentially. Where are you at with all of that?
Yeah, they are live. I have not advertised much yet. So yeah, I'm calling it consultation right now because really what I'm doing is we're taking a look at either your business or your proposition for a market. So I'm working with both the small business owners and the folks that want to host markets and events. So sort of two buckets there. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. But for the small businesses, we can look at your application. Why aren't you getting into markets? Not even necessarily just mine, but if you're a small business and you're just starting this and you're like, man, I applied to 15 markets this year and I didn't get into any of them, or I got into one and it wasn't the one I wanted, or whatever. Like, let's look at it. Is it your photos? Is it the way you're describing your business? Is it are you just not niched down enough? Are you not doing anything unique enough? Like, we can kind of pinpoint those problems. I'm not necessarily going to solve them for you because that usually takes a lot of digging, like a lot of personal work, but we can point them out and we can say, okay, here's what you need to look at. And here's where you can sort of address those things. And then with the market host, it's, have you considered restrooms? Is there parking for people? How are you marketing? Where are you marketing? What is the audience of that event going to be? Are you even hitting the right demographics for where you're trying to host it or whatever? And we can talk about some of those pitfalls or success points, or just looking at it from a different lens to make sure you're getting all your bases covered.
It's so cool because it just extends the value that you provide to people in so many cool ways. You mentioned marketing. I want to talk about that. You are like really, really awesome at that. I feel like all of a sudden I just knew the name. And that doesn't just happen overnight, but the fact that it did for me, and maybe it's the people I know or that I'd been to other similar markets, but you obviously had some strategy there and you are a graphic designer trained to be. So what
Mhm.
has that looked like for you from the beginning of your business, like your marketing strategy or like the branding, all of it?
Yeah. After I did the first one called the Bothell Maker Market, I realized that that was putting me in too small of a box and that I didn't necessarily want to only be in Bothell. So the following year, I rebranded to Making Local Markets, which is when I sort of rebranded to Making Local also from my previous macrame business, which was totally different. They probably could have the same name, but they probably shouldn't. So I looked at what I wanted the business to be, and I wanted to make local things accessible. I wanted to make shopping local a thing that everyone could do. I wanted to bring local businesses even more locally. And so I wanted to make local accessible. I wanted to make local blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, oh, well, I'm just making local things. I'm like making local. Okay, that's what it is. And that's sort of a very simplified version. I went through a lot of iterations of that, but that's where that came from. And then I was like, okay, so I can kind of have making local where you're getting like resources, tips, maybe I'm going to be starting some webinar series, like we can do some small business building. And then we've got these markets, which are sort of an extension of that. At some point, I'm going to be launching the Making Local Marketplace, which will be an online shopping system. So they're all sort of
So cool.
feeding off of that same tree trunk, right? Yes, they are different things and they are different audiences maybe, but they're all sort of stemming from that same root system. They're stemming from that same place. And then with the branding, we need to see things 7 times before we even like it even registers in our brain, and our attention span is so short. One of the things I was seeing with other events over the past, decade that I was doing them and stuff is that people couldn't keep up with the renaming and the themed markets. Like they'd have a different name for their, holiday market than they did for their Valentine's market, than they did for their summer markets. And it's like, how do people know that that's all done by the same person or group? And so I didn't want to do that. I knew what I didn't want to do. And so then it was like, okay, they're all just going to be the Making Local Market, and they're going to have a date. And that's what people are going to remember. And that's how people are going to see that. And then I just sort of kept like pounding that in. Like every single post you see on my Instagram has the market's branding and the logo and whatever that seasonal one is in every single post. It's not going to be the first image, but like I'm using it on every single one so that even if you're scrolling and maybe the person was featured with their work and you didn't like it, you were like, oh, okay, that's cool, whatever, but came through, it's going to come again. And maybe that next time it'll be the branding of the market. And you'll be like, oh yeah, I love that market. Wait, what is this? And then you sort of dig in and you look and you're like, oh, well, that person's super local. That's awesome. Or this person does something really different with their insert product here than I've seen before. And you sort of get that discovery moment while also saying, oh, but I recognize that market or that brand or that logo or whatever. You're getting that repetition.
Yeah.
You can put a green circle on a rectangle or trapezoid and people are gonna be like, oh, Starbucks. You can put a swoosh with no context and people are gonna be like, oh yeah, Nike. And that's the sort of level of branding that I sort of was trained to create. And you can't go too big, right? So
Yeah. And you make cute little leave behinds that I see around. Are you personally driving those around and dropping them off at all the coffee shops?
yeah, I schlep on foot and by car. I should probably go by bike if the weather was nicer, but we also have very hilly here. So yeah, no, I put out all the posters and the postcards, and someday maybe I'll have a team of teenager volunteers who can do that for me. But for now, it's just me. And part of that's networking too, right? Like I get to introduce the markets to the surrounding businesses that are there, or talk to an owner who might also feature small businesses who, can share with their audience. Like it's a win-win. So,
Do you have any horror stories?
ooh, like what? Like vendors being
Vendors
terrible?
being divas, customers being awful, business owners being like, you're gonna take away from my business.
Not a ton, honestly, and I've been very, very grateful for that. I'm also very intentional about if you're gonna be a jerk, you don't get to be here. So if I ever find out that somebody has been a total unwarranted, jerk, like, that's nice. Thanks for being here this one time, but no thanks to coming back. And that's really what keeps the vibe up, and the vendors notice it and the shoppers notice it. Like so many people have been like, I don't know what this is, but it is so fun, even though it's pouring rain. And like
Yes.
everyone's still happy. And they're like, how is that even possible? And I'm like, we're all friends here. I don't know. We're just all here to have a good time and support each other. And that's really the basis of that. I've had a couple vendors who have been like very particular about certain things and make requests that I'm like, that's nice that you're requesting that. I will do my best, but that's very personal, like you don't, that is not actually my job to provide that to you. I will do my best, but no. I got pretty lucky that we haven't had a ton of divas. I did have somebody accuse their booth. So sometimes we have shared booths, which is where two vendors share the same 10 by 10 tent space. And they both have sort of an aisle facing customers. So they're both getting primo access to shoppers. But, sometimes if you got to use the restroom, you're by yourself or you're in a booth with your booth mate and you got to use the restroom or get food or whatever, grab something from your vehicle. And there was one vendor who said, when I was gone, my booth mate stole some of my product. And I was like, ooh, that's ballsy to accuse them of that. B, did you talk to them about it? C, are you sure? Because I know the other vendor that you were paired with, and that does not seem like something they would do. And I think what had happened was that it was just a misunderstanding and that something had gotten put somewhere else because a customer had looked at it and then set it down somewhere differently. But that was probably the most I've had. And then a lot of it has been Sarah is learning how to do this drama. Oh, I need to know that most vendors don't want to be right next to a food truck because of their generators running, and the generators are running for 6 hours at a time, and it's noisy and it doesn't always smell great. And that for them to say at the end of the market, hey, I didn't love being next to the generator, I have a headache and I'm not feeling great, that's just good information for me to know. That's not being dramatic. That's just, now I know and I won't do that again, kind of thing. So thankfully not a ton of drama. And Bothel's shoppers are incredible. And I don't know what I did to deserve them, but they are phenomenal. And we don't have very many people who come in and they're like, oh, I could make that at home, or ooh, so expensive, or just all of the comments that you see, people making reels about what I heard at a market today about my product. We don't get a lot of
Oh,
that. It's
ooh,
really,
awkward.
really great. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I
People,
feel like vendors have to have tough skin, thick
they
skin.
do.
You do too.
Mhm. Oh yeah. And you learn that in design school, but you also learn that as a vendor, and then you learn that working with small businesses, like you have to be okay with rejection. You have to be okay with getting feedback. And if you're not, then have fun out there. Like most of the time when people are providing feedback, they're doing it with good intentions and they're doing it to help you. Now there are ways to go about saying that, and there are kind ways and non-condescending ways to do that. But most of the time when somebody's giving you feedback, it's from a good place.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't take that, then that's on you, you know?
Yeah. I also think too, like to that point, I recently published a book and my grandparents don't get it. And I keep telling them, well, you're not my audience, but thank
Yeah.
you for sharing your thoughts.
Right? Yeah, no, my family, some of them don't even get it. My mom has never been to a market, and that's okay. That's okay. I'm not her, she's not my audience, and that's all right.
Yeah.
But it does suck sometimes when you're like, wow, I really wish you would get it, or I really wish I could say something that would help you understand. But sometimes I don't want to, and that's okay too.
Yeah. Well, and it is such an experience. Even in the pouring rain Bothell one, you were in your like orange Ghostbusters suit and there was huge speakers around, music playing. Like you said, it was a vibe, it was a party, even in that rain. My kids were and I were walking around with our hoods, just fangirling over London, buying candles, buying ditty bags, buying sweet treats. And I was amazed at the fact that you like the speaker that you had was humongous. I would say it was
Mhm.
like 3 feet tall. And then I was like, how is it not electrocuting people? This is obviously like a waterproof speaker.
Yeah, they're meant to be outdoors. Yeah.
I got very like down the hole in my brain of, okay, this is amazing that she has this speaker. And you think of every detail. So
Mhm.
are those things that you like up front did, like the music part of it? Because some people do live music too.
Yeah.
Or was it something that came in time where you're like, every party needs some music?
I had music from day one, and I have to credit my husband Brad with the music. I think I knew that I wanted music there, but I didn't know what I wanted that music to be. And I just I personally didn't want to manage one more scheduling thing with live musicians, and because they're not going to play for 6 hours, right? You've got to have 3 or 4 that are each playing for an hour or 2 maybe with some breaks. And then I knew that live music doesn't carry the same way that amplified sound does. And then I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to find a place for said live music. Where do you put them? And so I just was like, that's too hard for right now. I don't want to think about that. And my husband has been in film and music for forever. And he loves digging, he calls it mining for new music. And so he creates a new 6-hour playlist for every single event. And
That's so cool.
isn't that rad?
What a fun way for him to contribute. That's really cool.
Yeah, and he gets to do what he loves, and he's super good at it. Each market kind of has a little bit of a different, he'll kind of go, okay, this time I'm going kind of like 80s pop, or maybe I'm doing like 70s funk, or he'll have a little bit of a theme without it being like, wow, all we're doing is listening to 80s music today. It's not that. You're always going to find music that you haven't heard of before, along with some really great like classics, and you can find those all on his Spotify
Oh,
account.
we'll link it in the show notes. That's
Oh,
amazing.
fun. That's awesome. Yeah, so he's been doing that since the very first market, and there are probably less than 20 songs that have been repeated over the past 3 years.
That's so
So,
cool.
it's
Yeah,
been
send
really
us the
fun.
link and we'll make sure it's in the show notes. And
Cool.
I know too, you've met Ryan from the Chamber of Commerce here.
Mhm.
He also runs or owns the Everett Music Initiative. That would be a
Yeah.
fun collab between your husband and him. And I know there's that huge Apex place up there it's like full of graffiti. That would be like a super vibey, fun spot for a
Yes.
market if they're open to it. I know Everett's like really wanting to do a lot more.
Yeah, they've been stepping up their game for sure. The Fisherman's Wharf, like music and food and maker festival is freaking awesome. I haven't been yet, but I'm like determined to go. I end up having plans every time, and I'm like, nah, I need to go see it.
Michelle and I did their website. So we
Oh,
worked with
cool.
Ryan on that, and he's just such a great resource for everything Everett and such a fanboy
Yeah,
that you guys collabing, I know that he's working with another person for taste or whatever, but we had sent your name too because we're like, Sarah and Ryan need to know each other and something's gonna work out in this like music and makers whole
for
conglomerate.
sure. For sure. Yeah. And no, we've chatted, we've connected. I think it'll probably be next year because this year's sort of already scheduled out. But yeah, always looking for those amazing local connections at the city and government level, at the chamber level, and then also the small businesses. Like, this is what makes the sort of process happen, is those
Yeah.
connections. Yeah.
And you obviously could stay very busy every single day. So, how are you, as now a free person who is used to being in the golden handcuffs, managing your time and your resources and your energy?
That is a learning process in and of its own, like on its own. And I think I'm really lucky to know a lot of people who are already doing it. And so some of the things that I've seen them do that worked, I was like, okay, maybe I'll try that and see if that works for me. And some of the things work and some of the things don't. But one of the things that helps me a lot is that I get up, and whatever my morning schedule is, I get up and I get dressed as if I'm going somewhere. It's like my brain needs to know that I am working and I am not in my pajamas and I put shoes on, which is silly, I think, to some people, but it tells my brain that like, oh, this is what we're doing today and we're getting in the flow and we're learning. And one of the things that I've been working on just personally over the last year or so is that I got diagnosed with ADHD. And I was like, oh, oh, this is a whole new bag of information that I have about myself that is helping me equip myself with better tools to do that work. And it's not a, there's, I have chosen to be on the medication. Not everyone needs that and everyone wants that. It's helped me a lot. And that's been sort of pivotal, I think, because I honestly think I would just like, I would get in analysis paralysis and sit and do nothing. There are a lot of things that has helped me build the right types of habits to sort of get going. I've also been trying to schedule appointments because then you're like, you're up and you're going, and you're like, I have from X to X to work until I have an appointment, whether it's a meeting with a friend or a lunch or doing something like this amazing podcast or connecting with local folks or just co-working with another small business out in the world where there are other people has been super, super important for me to get that going. But I love the flexibility. I love that I can work and then go to lunch or, meet my husband for a movie after work or whatever and come back and work for a couple more hours or not. That flexibility has been just really good for me. I've been working on a garden this summer and it's okay, it's nice out. I'm going to go take my quote unquote lunch break and spend an hour or two outside in the garden or whatever. And that's been really, really good for me, I think. So wouldn't trade that for anything.
Well, was something you said before when you first started talking about this specific thing. I also got diagnosed with ADHD recently and just started meds in January, and it's been completely life-changing.
Yeah. Right?
We were just talking about Emily's little blue pills.
Oh, are you on the same one I'm on? That's awesome.
It just makes everything feel like manageable, right?
Mhm.
And you've heard people say, I took Adderall in college or I need to just stay wired. And I'm like, nope, it just helps me like chill
Mhm.
and like you focus and like
Yeah.
you can get everything done. And I can even take Adderall. I had a follow-up appointment today. I was telling my provider I could take one at 7 o'clock and still go to bed at 10.
Yeah.
And she's
That's
like,
amazing.
oh, that's how you know that you need that.
Yeah.
That's how you know it's the right fit for you.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes. I told her today, I'm like, I wish I would have started this 10 years ago. And she's like, but you started it now and it's helping and that's good. I'm like, okay, thanks.
Yeah, right?
But yeah, but
Mm.
it is a lot of new information. And then you just realize like how much you've been adapting your whole life. And it's really interesting. This stupid example. My husband, I'm like, what time are you setting your alarm for in the morning? And I looked at his phone and he had one alarm. How many
What?
alarms do you have, Sarah? How many
Like
alarms do you have?
7.
I
Even
think
now on meds, I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 9. I don't usually set them all.
12,
But I
13.
always set 3 or 4. Yeah.
I have
I have
one.
24
Yeah.
because my brain doesn't do like okay, just reset this one. I'm like, no.
All I can think is how awful it would be to sleep next to you.
No, it's not. Billy's a snoozer. Billy snoozes,
I
but
hate snooze.
I hate it too. But he has one alarm that he sets. But anytime I need to create an alarm, I just make a new one. I don't edit it. I
Yeah.
just make a
Yeah.
new. And I found
I
out
think
that's
that's
like
pretty normal.
well,
I'm thinking you set a bunch every day.
No, because I would, and then I would ignore all of them. That's just
Because I may have ADHD just based on what everyone else says, but I think I would get wired from Adderall.
Yeah. I think one of the things that my provider had told me about the medication, and I'm on Vyvanse, which is a little bit different than Adderall, but it's been a really good fit for me. But he said it just sort of turns the volume down, and that was really critical because I am my own worst enemy, and like it's gonna be me that gets in my own way that creates problems for myself. So if I can turn my own internal volume down, that's going to make me that much more successful. And I think that was one of the things where I was like, oh yeah, no. Okay. That
that's
totally makes sense. And I understand that.
That's something I mentioned to Whitney too. I was like, I'm more self-confident. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah.
It's because you don't have that internal dialogue going all of the time, telling you all of the things you're forgetting to do, all of the things you wish you were doing, all of the things that you could be doing, and you don't, and all of the things that you've been supposedly, because your brain is telling you that you've been rejected from, or that people don't like you. You've just turned all of that volume down so that you can actually go, okay, wait, this is real. This is not real.
Yep.
This actually needs to get done. This doesn't need to get done. Sure, I'd like to do that, but it doesn't need to be today. And you can kind of start to actually prioritize those things and create a functional brain space for yourself, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And to your comment about the 7 touch points thing, I think just women generally, especially more than men, have that nobody cares, nobody wants to hear you talk about this again going through your brain. And as a business owner,
Mhm.
you have to talk about things all the time. And so I told myself, especially like with my book, which is a vulnerable thing, I every time I hear the little voice, shut up about your book, Whitney, I'm like, do it again.
Yep.
And so then I talk about it again because I'm
Yeah.
like, well, the 7 touch points, they don't know. And
Yeah.
so I just am actively rewiring that negative little, nobody cares, shut up. And
Yeah.
I'm like, no, keep talking. So I
Yeah.
tell her, and I even
Yeah.
have the little photo of my little girl self, and I have one tooth in my 2 front teeth, and I have a full flower, like shorteralls outfit on, and I like
Adorable.
am sitting on the couch with both arms like splayed across it and a little hat that matches my shorteralls. And I like talk to her all the time. This is for you, girlfriend. Every time I'm talking, and she would be so proud. Like, I look at my kids now, and they are so proud. Today, I'm taking them to a bookstore to try to sell my book to them. I have a warm conversation already going, but I want my kids to see it. And I
Yeah.
want that little girl to see me doing it again, doing it again, doing it again. And say, I mean, I'm sure it's exhausting sometimes. It's like very exciting, but also
Yeah.
exhausting. And especially when you have the added layers of ADHD and conditioning and so much negative self-talk that we're just like we absorb through our lives,
Mhm.
it can make running a business like that really hard when it's
Yeah.
self-owned, self-funded, self-promoted, you know?
Yeah, and that goes back to having a thick skin too, right? You're gonna get no's, you're gonna get rejections, you're gonna get that, and the way that you choose to respond to that means everything.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, to the 7 touch points, I talk about that all the time with small businesses who are like, "Well, I don't wanna bug them." And I
Uh-huh.
was like, "Okay,
So
but
common.
do you feel bugged by XYZ thing that you signed up for or XYZ email newsletter? Do you feel bugged by that? You opted into that. Like, your audience has opted into this.
Yeah.
They want to hear from you, and if they don't, they will leave, and that's okay too." But, the social media and stuff, 1% of our followers sees our content. You're gonna need to shout it out into the void a few more times to reach a few more people in your audience.
Yep.
If you're using email marketing and you're sending an email once a quarter or once a year, that's not enough. You're not staying top of mind. Get it weekly or, monthly at least if you can. And it's about prioritizing where you're spending your time. I admittedly spend a lot of time on Instagram, but Instagram, that makes sense for me. That's where my audience is. That's where the shoppers are and also the small businesses are for the market. So that makes sense. And every time I host a market, I get new followers because I'm finding new people because all of the vendors are also promoting and it creates this giant web of people that
Yeah.
are seeing that content. And I'm posting like 3 to 5 times a day just to get through all of the vendors. It's really not a quantity thing. If it was up to me, I would never post that many times, but I just have to get through everybody. But people are like, "Well, but you're on Instagram." And I'm like, "Yeah." And I get like maybe 20 likes on a post. That is not the point. The point
Mm-hmm.
isn't the metrics of Instagram. The point of being on Instagram is to build your community. And then your community will then follow you, hopefully on your email list or your website or your shop or whatever. And then you're going to use that relationship to then market. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where your 7 touch points comes in. Like, you could post 7 touch points a day on Instagram and nobody would see it all 7 times.
Right.
So, you
Yeah.
have to be thinking of creative ways to meet them in that marketing space and actually get to your target audience.
You are so smart at this. You're like saying all these things that I tell people all the time too. And I'm like, yes, Sarah, preach it. Because everyone needs to know these things. And it's such a common thing to say, I don't want to bug them.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Or
also, like my grandma would say, that's pretty presumptuous to assume that they are even getting your content or consuming it or not immediately deleting your email. I'm such a nerd for all my analytics. I'm like, what's my open rate? What's my click rate? And I'm like, dang, resend to unopens.
yeah. Yeah, do it.
No shame.
No. And you shouldn't. Like, that's a tool, right? Use the tool to its maximum capacity. Don't shortchange yourself. You're paying for that service. Use the service.
Absolutely. Especially when it's Flowdesk and it's $400 a year. So
Yeah, exactly.
I'm tracking my spending in a very big way right now. Emily, are we fighting over rapids?
I have them up.
Okay. And you don't have to be rapid. Rapid is up to you, how you define it.
Okay. Like a speed round.
You like it too.
Yeah.
What are you proudest of in your business right now?
Community. I love, love, love the community that has been built. I have vendors who have said, any market that you host, I will apply to anywhere. And I was just like, wow, that is the biggest compliment that I could have possibly have ever gotten. So
I love
community.
that.
Do you roll them over? Are there people like on the cheer squad? Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. I watched that show for a while, especially because one of my girls that I went to college with was on the squad. And some people
Awesome.
like, no, they still had to, some cheer squads. I'm not a cheerleader, so I don't know. But sometimes you're like grandmothered in, and other times you have to like
You audition every year, yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. No,
Emily is a
people,
cheerleader. She knows.
yeah. No, people have to apply every year. Yeah.
And every market. So like London, even though she's fabulous, she's
hmm
applying.
hmm Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Nope. And just because you got in the year before doesn't mean you're going to get in the next year.
Mm.
I
Because this
like that.
community keeps building.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 years ago you were the best in your field, in your niche, in your whatever product you're making.
hmm
Maybe now you're not.
Yeah.
And that can suck
Cut
when you're like, wow, I
cutthroat.
was kind of counting on those and it's sorry,
Yeah, but it
you
gives
know.
other
Slay.
people the opportunity to shine too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've all been to those events where it's, wow, okay, this is the same 30 people as it
Yep.
has been for the
Yep.
last 5 years. Let's switch it up a little bit. And I that was a sort of a value statement that I made at the very beginning when I was setting this up, was that you will pretty much never be accepted to every single market, and you will pretty much never be guaranteed to get into everything you apply for, even if you're sort of what I consider a regular, because every single market, I want 30% at least to be different than the market before. In March, out of those 120 vendors, between March and May, the May event had, I think, 6 of the same vendors that March did.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's how we get more people involved and more people shining and more people the opportunity to see if it's a good fit, you know? And sometimes it's not, and that's okay too. So,
It's amazing. When's your next market?
July 13th.
Okay,
So
perfect.
about 5, 6 weeks.
Noted. And in Bothell?
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm going to come to that. Tell us about a book you read or a podcast you listened to that recently changed the way you're thinking about your life or your business.
Mm. I have been reading Financial Feminist, Tori Dunlap's Her
I
First
have
100
it.
Days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I don't know that I necessarily think that it's changed the way that I'm doing business, but it is changing the way I'm thinking about finances, which is sort of part of the business, right?
Yeah.
So I've been listening to the podcast, I've been going through the book, and I've been doing some of that work because I have historically been telling myself and everyone around me that I'm not good with money. And that's not really that's not a true statement, right? I wasn't taught certain things about money. That's a true
Mm-hmm.
statement. Or I wasn't aware that there were XYZ things about money that I could be doing. I didn't know.
Right.
You can't
Yep.
you can't badmouth yourself for something that you didn't know. If you
And
didn't know,
that
you didn't
is
know.
undereducated. Yeah, I am on the
Mhm.
journey with you.
Yeah. So I think I would recommend that to anybody who wants a different perspective on finances and just really wants the basics from a non-judgy perspective. Excuse me. Because that was I mean, I've read finance books before and they've either been like too woo woo and mindset based, which is like, yeah, that's great. But also, I need the practical tips, please. And thank you. Bye. So it has a nice combination of do the work, get clearer for yourself. And also, here are just like actual practical things that you can be doing in the meantime.
I like that. I need to
Yeah,
read that one.
I
that
have
was good.
a whole list for you when you're ready. I just finished Smart Women Finish Rich, which is one of the classics in that field, which marries those two really well. And it was written by a man. So at first I was like, oh,
Mm,
what the hell? And he addresses it straight up, like first couple pages, and you'll really appreciate why a man is writing this book.
nice.
What would your last meal ever be on Earth?
My husband and I talk about this all the time. We had very, very different food upbringings. Uh, and I'm a huge fan of girl dinner. Give me a lovely
Same.
bottle of red wine and some beautiful cheese and some handmade bread and crackers, and I am so, so happy. And that is
I
not
didn't
my
know that was girl dinner.
yeah, girl dinner is like Lunchables, but make it grown up.
Yeah,
That's how I consider girl dinner. Is
I
you're just
love
gonna
that.
snack on whatever brings you joy, and that's. I think I pulled that from TikTok or something. So also don't judge me.
I'm like a grazer too. So like my husband's always, if he's not around because he feeds us for the most part, he's like, what are you eating? What are you gonna eat? What did you eat? And I'm like, can you get off my jock? I just went into the fridge and made myself a board. If I
Yeah.
even put it on the board, like here's some pickles, here's some
I do
salami.
that all the time.
Yeah,
Mhm.
All the time.
Exactly.
big fan of
Yeah.
girl dinner, girl math too. It's
Yeah.
real.
It's super real.
What is the best business purchase you've made in the last 6 months under $100? But you don't have to actually do $100. You can, but
Oh, best business purchase. I think it was $11. And this has made Market Day so much more manageable. But it's a silly little thing off Amazon that I would love to commission a small business to make them instead so that I could sell them in the marketplace. But it's a little just zipper pouch thing. It's got two sides. So there's a it opens two ways. So there's one side with a zipper and then it meets on the other side with a zipper. So you got two sort of full double facing opening. I don't know if that makes sense, but it is a cord and charger thing. So you can stick all your little square reader attachments in there. You can stick your cords in there. There's room for like the charger with the USB and the little plug thing. And it just keeps, they all have a little place and they're zippered. And it's, oh, I know exactly where all my cords are. And I'm not like digging through the market bin to
I
find
like
them.
that. That's cute.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
What do you
super
even
personal.
Google on Amazon to find that cord?
Cord keeper, cord
I can
keeper.
probably include that link too.
Cute.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, I think $9, $11. It was like not a lot.
What's lighting you up lately?
Oh, what a fun question. I just did a webinar series with One Eastside Spark, which is a nonprofit that focuses on businesses based on the East Side. They work with small businesses. And we worked together on a little webinar series. And I had always known that I wanted to provide that kind of content and that kind of resource. But I was having a lot of imposter syndrome about it. Like, why would anybody want to hear me talk about this? People already know this. This is out there in the world in 1,000 different places. Why would they come here to get it? All of those things. And the sort of teaching aspect has been really lighting me up. Like, oh, people don't actually know what a niche is or how to niche down, even though I feel like there's tons of resources out there. These people aren't seeing the same resources that I've seen. So now I can provide that as a resource. So that's been like very much sort of reinforcing that yes, that is something I should do with this business. And so I'm excited to do more of that. And I'm going to be teaching some workshops and stuff too. And Whitney, I was going to talk to you about like maybe being at Workhorse for some of those. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's awesome.
And big props to you too, because what I've learned through like business ownership is you put yourself in these new positions and you don't realize how much like healing might not be the right word for it, but like how much personal work you have to get out of your own way. Like the first time
Yeah.
I hosted workshops, they were free and I was like almost paying people to come because I was like, oh my God, I'm so grateful that you came to my workshop. Here's like a
Yeah.
free review of every like basically was paying people to be there because I was so like, I can't believe they're showing up for me.
Yeah.
And that shows like what work you have to do. And it's an important process.
Yeah.
It's
Totally.
brave.
Thanks. And ditto. I'm sure writing a book and putting that into the world is feeling a lot of the same feels. And that's a big, huge thing, you know?
Thank you. Honestly, I keep telling people this. So I had this complex of before I was like, I could never own a restaurant. I could never do anything like public facing where people could review you because I was so terrified of what people might say or like how angry it would make me that people didn't get it or whatever. And then I went viral on TikTok several times and I quickly fucking got over that. I was like, all right, like who cares what some stranger on the internet says? This if I get that one comment, like Emily and I were at V and Vin, and one of the guys there told us this woman picked it up and said, I really hope this helps my daughter. Like,
Oh,
that's what I'm here for. All you
yes.
trolls, although no
And
one's saying stuff about my grief book on TikTok, and it's not the goal to go viral, but I mean, they start talking about your face, they tell you you're ugly, they say your voice is weird. I mean, anything, because they're just
yeah.
so sad.
Yeah.
So
So
I
awful.
that healing process for me, like I knew that the universe was preparing me to not give a shit about feedback anymore
Yeah.
in the sense of, people who don't matter to my
Yeah.
mission.
Yeah. 1,000%. And that's something that I try and work into conversations with small business owners is that, look, even if I reject you, that doesn't mean that there isn't a place for you. Or if I'm providing feedback on something, it's because I think you can do better and you have that in you. You just need to do that work, and that's a totally different place than somebody just being like, oh, shut up. Your voice is lame, like
Right.
that's just terrible. And it's these people have nothing better to do. And that's sad and sucks.
Yeah,
But real feedback that can be priceless and
totally.
super important. But you have to be ready to hear it and you have to be ready to take it. If if 10 years ago somebody was like, oh, you're going to start markets and work with 100,000 people every year, it's not that many. I'm totally exaggerating, but oh, and yeah, people will stop you because your face is on the internet and they know who you are and they'll see you and just be like, oh, hey, you're so and so, right? And I'm just like, wait, what? Like I would never have thought of that. And thankfully I've mostly had good experiences with people, but yeah, it's weird and it's terrifying. It's so strange.
You are an influencer.
That's been a weird thing to sort of, label. That's been a weird unknown part of this process. Yeah.
I noticed it. And you're good at just genuinely enjoying people, and that's what I love seeing.
Yeah. I do genuinely love people. I'm also very introverted, weirdly. Pretty much the 2 days after a market, like, don't talk to me. Like I don't want to do anything. I don't want to go anywhere. I need not only just like physical recuperation, but also okay, I've peopled a lot.
Yeah.
I've done enough peopling for a couple days.
Sarah, before we let you go, how can people find you online?
So I'm on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. Best way to find me is going to be Instagram, though. So Making Local on all those platforms, Making Local Markets on Instagram and also on Facebook, and then on my website, makinglocal.com.
Which is beautiful. And you show off your dogs too.
I do. They're the best. My little cheerleaders. I thought I would have to preface this call with if you hear any weird snorts or farts or slobber sounds or feet click clacking on the floor, sorry, that's one of my small herd of dogs. But they are all snoozing their little hearts out in another room. So I guess that's the perk about bulldogs. They sleep.
Wait, knew mommy had to work.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you so much for being here today, Sarah. It was really nice to meet you and hear about your story. And I am so looking forward to coming to the next market.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a total pleasure, and I can't wait to connect more in the future.
All right. See you on the next episode of The Coast.
Bye.
Bye.